podcast. Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, where we talk about how writing works, how writers work, and how the best writers risk being strange. And I'm talking to Brady Tiel. And Brady has a novel out called Mended. It's a science fiction novel, and Brady's debut novel. And I want to talk to Brady about the process of putting this novel out and the process of kind of putting out your first kind of major thing as a writer. And just sort of and the kind of personal connection here is that Brady took my creative writing class, and I'm always interested in I teach so many people at the University of Winnipeg, and sometimes I'll teach at the University of Manitoba, or I'll just be doing personal one-to-one things. I'm always interested who ends up doing things and who doesn't, because of course most people don't. And so congrats on completing the book and putting it out. And maybe say a little bit about yourself, Brady, and about the book.
Yeah, thanks. First of all. So yeah, I took your creative writing course. I think that was 2 years ago now, maybe, right around there. And right now I'm kind of slowed down on the whole school thing. I'm not in university at the moment. Taking a term off to work and to focus on the book and kind of hopefully kickstart that so I can keep doing that. But yeah, the book is it's a science fiction story, and it's a pretty crazy story. A lot of people that have read it so far, friends and family, have a lot of people tell me that it sounds about right for me and what I've always been interested in. So yeah, it was a long process, but to finally have it out and to be dedicating a lot of spare time to that is pretty rewarding and pretty big.
Yeah, and if you're not in Winnipeg, if you're in Winnipeg, it's in different local places. But if you're not in Winnipeg, the best place right now to go for this book to check it out is on Amazon.
Yeah.
Again, the book's called Mended, and then Brady, Bradytiel, Brady Tiel. And I just want to read people the description that you have on Amazon here because I love how this description develops. Mended finds the past and present colliding as a secret revolutionary technology threatens to destabilize human history. Two brothers, consumed by conspiracy theory that has gripped the most of their lives, find themselves face to face with the very thing they thought was not possible, an operational time machine. The only thing standing in the way of a new global superpower happens to be 300 years in the past in the form of some of history's most feared men, 17th century pirates. To me, that
Yeah.
last line, that last sentence is, a real twist. And I'm curious to know just a bit about, how you kind of came about this writing this story.
Yeah, it's come from a lot of different things. Which was the whole I knew I wanted to do something with the pirates. Like that was the original idea to write a story having these historical pirates. So there's a lot of the characters or a handful of the characters that are the pirates anyway. The people in the past are most of them are were real people. So there was a bunch of research, and I'm not a big history buff, but that time period and that little piece of history has always interested me for some reason. So I knew I wanted to write about the pirates, and but I wasn't so sure how to do a story just solely in the 17th century on pirates. So then I started playing around with the idea because I've always been a science fiction guy. And so then kind of figured out how can I bridge the gap between doing something that people would better understand, that's more modern, but at the same time that I would like to enjoy writing in the in terms of history and the pirates. So that kind of all came together, and that was right on the heels too of Avengers Endgame coming out. So it was the big time travel story. And so I watched that and then talking about that with friends and stuff. And because every movie has their own rules for time travel and everything, right? So that was a pretty big deal to kind of set rules for myself, something that's different, but something that is still easy enough to manage without creating these glaring plot holes in the story.
And so, what precisely did you kind of decide to do or not do when it comes to time travel? Because you do point out that there's a really time travel is one of those things that is done a lot in fiction, but is rarely done, in a way that is sensible in fiction. But also,
Right,
you have the basic problem that it's not sensible
right,
fundamentally,
exactly.
and you can't overcomplicate it in fiction.
Yeah,
So you'll have like and what I find with time travel stories is the ones that stand out really stand out.
right,
Like Primer, for example. But even Primer is very hard to kind of fathom what's going on precisely. The
right,
Terminator makes more sense, like to an audience, but once you start thinking about it, it makes less and less sense. Like, and
right,
so you kind of have that problem. I find always in time travel is more or less the more the right audience thinks about it, often the less sense it makes. But there's a level at which you need the audience to be thinking about it.
right. And I think the big thing for me was something that, I mean, I guess in one way you can call it kind of lazy writing if you wanted to, but I think I knew from the beginning I didn't want any there to be time travel where the characters are seeing themselves or meeting themselves. Like I'd never want to do that because then I knew that was going to be a slippery slope and that'd be way too hard to explain that in a way that makes sense or is actually fun to read. So I knew that was off the table. And so when this technology gets developed in the book, I kind of had fun playing with it in the sense that there was really the rules were so vague in the book for what was quote unquote allowed and not allowed because the technology was new in the book. So no one else really knew how it worked either. So you
And
have
they
the
just need to do
characters
the thing they're doing in the story. They don't
exactly
need to, unveil all the possible things that could happen.
right, and I think that was a pretty big like something that is pretty relatable to the real world too, where I personally believe anyway, there's so much new technology coming out that the pace at which we advance is a lot faster than our morals are advancing. So we make these things not really understanding the consequences that they might have. So that kind of played into the story too, where we're using this technology, um, not fully understanding what we're unleashing on ourselves and to other people.
The other thing I think that it often gets forgotten by writers when they're dealing with technology in a story is that the real way that technology works in the world is that it changes constantly.
Right.
So like you'll get a PS5 and then like a year later there's a new PS5. That's how
Yeah.
the technology works in the real world. And
Right.
they'll just update your existing PS5,
Exactly.
magically from the
Yeah.
cloud. And even though you've got the same device you had a week ago, now it does different things. Like that's how technology actually operates. But writers, I think, will often like fixate on the idea that they have to have like exactly how this technology operates all figured out and explained to the reader. And often the reader just doesn't one care. They understand there's no time machine, right?
Right.
They just need to buy into the idea as far as the story is concerned early on. And then, basically, once they've bought into like X, Y, and Z, as long as you don't throw B at them, they're fine.
Mhm.
um, or you justify B when it comes in or whatever. Like I think a lot of people on one hand overthink the technology and they'll do all this world building. I see this with fantasy more than science fiction, but you also will see it all in science fiction. They'll do all this kind of world building or future escaping or whatever you want to call it, and they won't remember that the reader doesn't care about any of that stuff,
Right.
or they care about like the 10% that actually
Right.
matters to the story in some way. Not
Yeah.
that you can be lazy about it, but like you say, they don't need to meet if they're going 300 years in back in the past, they're not going to meet themselves.
Right.
So it doesn't need to be figured out exactly whether that could happen or how or whatever.
Exactly. And yeah, and then to write these characters going into the past when they meet the the other characters who are existing in the past who have obviously no concept of anything, much less a time machine, right? They don't know um like even which comes into play later in the book, like a motorboat for pirates. Like this is insane, right? They don't know. anything like
Hmm.
that. So getting to write and then that kind of covers itself too, because then obviously you don't have to explain anything about the time machine to those characters because they, even if you tried to explain it, those characters don't have a hope of understanding what is really going on anyway. So there's only a few characters who really were, or sections in the book even, that you really had to that I really had to have any semi explanation for the workings of it. And throughout the book it kind of gets it builds on itself. It's littered throughout. You slowly find out more and more how it works. But yeah, the mystery of why it opens up to where it opens up, and everything is kind of ambiguous as it's so new. We're just more excited to use it than to understand it really.
And then something I just again just kind of go back to uh, something I said mentioned earlier. I'm always interested in when I teach students. You know, often I complain to my friends that like the students, what they need to do is not listen to me or listen to me, don't listen to me, whatever. Like that's not really what I care about.
Mhm.
Although I think they should listen to me, but even if they don't, like what's going to make the difference fundamentally is not like did they learn my lesson, or but are they going to do anything, whether I like do the thing I said or don't, or do something else that I didn't say, but like just doing something. And I'm always interested in who does things and who doesn't do things. So I'm curious to know, like for you, like what was kind of your journey a little bit, like from like around that time when you were taking the class and doing like
Right.
serious work on writing. What kind of moved you forward to kind of keep doing stuff after the class and kind of get to the point where you're putting out a book yourself, because there's a lot of things that go into that. So like one, you decided to keep writing, which a lot of people don't do. Two, you actually completed a project. So a lot of people will write endlessly and not complete a project. And then three, you in this case have actually moved into self-publishing the project, which many people don't do. So a lot of people will complete a project and not put it out, and then of course putting it out yourself takes a whole sort of other level. So I'm just curious, kind of like know a bit of your path there, and like what maybe are some of the reasons that you ended up here where you're putting out a book versus not doing that, not like quitting, or not publishing it, or not finishing it. Like what are some of the sort of the things that I'm always curious to know, like what separates the wheat from the chaff in that sense, and like where you were
Okay.
hit problems and overcame them versus like
Right.
not.
Yeah. So when I took your course, I had started, I was partially underway writing already. Um, Publishing or like any thought of publishing was not even there yet. But then pretty much exactly what you just said. The difference of between people who, or the number of people who start writing and the number of people who don't finish their project or don't publish a project is it's a fraction of those people. Which, and I think when you said that the first time in the class, that really, I really connected with that because um I was like, I want to be I want to finish it. I want to see this whole thing through. And even going back further than that, all through high school and elementary, I was a huge Star Wars nerd and super into that. And I actually ran a social media page, which I still have, but seldom use anymore. That was for Star Wars, to talk about Star Wars and to essentially geek out with other people who were as into it as I was. And I was running that for years. And then eventually it got to a point, probably at the beginning of university, when I was like, as much as I like Star Wars and as much as I love dedicating my time to this to talk about it, I don't think I was ever getting a sense of fulfillment from it because it kind of dawned on me that it's like, as much as I love this and as much as I know it like the back of my hand, I won't ever be able to contribute to Star Wars unless I want a big lawsuit from Disney. Um, so that kind of hit me where I was like, I love this, but I can't really do anything with it. This is kind of just a hobby. So then that was when I was like, I need to write my own projects. I need to do something that I'm in full control of, but that I'm equally as passionate about. So I started writing this, and then I took your course, and then you said those words about it's just a fraction of the people who start writing actually finish writing and go on to publish. So in March, this coming March, it would have been 5 years, I think, since the day one of typing out the first word. So it was a long process, and of course, there were days I didn't write, there were weeks I didn't write, or months I didn't write in that span, and but I always came back to it, and I always knew I have to finish this. I need to finish this. And there were jobs that I had that I didn't really enjoy, and stuff I was doing. I was like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I want to do something that I'm excited about and that I'm passionate about. And on top of that, that other people hopefully will be passionate about, that it can be kind of a shared experience, which is always, that again goes way back to the Star Wars days, having shared the experience with people. I knew I wanted to keep doing that, to connect with people in something that we both really, really like.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm trying to think of which speech I give where I say that, but like I know that one of the things I often will try to do is break down the numbers for people because people have a hard time. Like if you go and look at stats related to the writing and publishing industry, you'll find things out like, publishers have this slush pile and they get like, 1,000 submissions a month or whatever it is. Like there'll be some big number like that.
Mhm.
And people will have the idea that, oh, well, if this place is getting like 1,000 submissions a month, that means they're getting like 100,000 plus a year. How could you possibly, the odds are so overwhelming.
Right.
And on one level, that's true. Like, those are the kinds of stats where we have these kind of overwhelming numbers. However, the thing that people often forget is like the bigger stat is like the people who just start something and don't do anything, or start something and don't finish it. And then once you're actually at the point where you're like submitting to a publisher, say, the other side of it is that most of those submissions are instantly disqualified. So even if somebody's getting 1,000 submissions, realistically they have 100 submissions
Right.
at best, because 900, like 90% of them are instantly disqualified because they're just absolute nonsense.
Right.
And obviously so. Like you can just open it up and it's like you read one page and you can throw it in the trash for whatever reason. And sometimes it's very simple reasons, like these people publish horror, you've sent them a romance novel,
Right.
and like the real numbers are not the reported numbers. So on one hand, it's easier than it seems. On the other hand, it's harder than it seems because the bigger hurdle is not even getting published so much, especially these days. But you have like self-publishing tools, and there's a level at which publishing has been democratized.
Mhm.
In some ways, publishing itself has not become the hurdle, but finishing is a massive hurdle. And then, of course, getting sales or noticed or whatever becomes the hurdle. And the interesting thing you say about Star Wars there, like it is an interesting point because I'll also talk to a lot of students who have like some idea that they're really passionate about pursuing, like they want to write, a musical based on their favorite band's album, or they want to write like a Star Wars movie, or they want to write something. They'll have like this massive thing, but they don't control. They want to write a Batman story. I was just talking to somebody the other day online who wants to write a Wonder Woman novel, and I was like, there is a path to writing a Wonder Woman novel,
Right.
but the path is not you write a Wonder Woman novel. The
Mhm.
path is you write your own novel, and then maybe you publish five more novels. Down the line, you might end up getting you know, like you might write a Wonder Woman novel.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I don't know if you know, there's a local writer here in Winnipeg. He works at the U of M, not the U of W where you were, but his name is David Annandale. who I've interviewed on this podcast a while ago. I should have him back, but he recently has been publishing Doctor Doom novels. And he's done a lot of writing for Warhammer as well. But he started out, of course, publishing like thrillers with the local publisher here,
Mm,
and eventually, he started working with this established IP and so on. Now he's become like the go-to guy for like Marvel's Doom novels, which is again something there is a path to that stuff, but it's
right.
ironically not what people think, which is like, oh, I'll just start writing Doctor Doom novels or whatever. If I
Mm,
want you want to write Star Wars, like ironically, the path to that is write your own science fiction novels, and then eventually, you
exactly.
might,
Yeah.
it's hard to get down there, but at the same time, there's more Star Wars than ever these days, and they need people to write it. So like it's interesting, but just to kind of go back to something you said though, um, so when you're in the project and you're taking, weeks off or months off and then coming back to it, what's the thing that was bringing you back to it? Because I find that, a lot of people just don't come back to it.
I think honestly, maybe as bad as it might sound, the thing that would draw me back after a long break would be the bad days I would have, where I was like, I need to do this. If not, partly I need to do this for the escape for myself, to just go into something different that's so isolated from the real world, or the bad days in which I was like, I need to do this for to hopefully have a future where I can keep doing this. Where this isn't the only thing, where I can wake up and not have to be stressed about something else that I'm not looking forward to doing or that I don't want to do, and something like that. So all the time, and of course sometimes those long breaks would be because I was genuinely busy, not because I didn't want to write. But obviously real life gets in the way sometimes, and there's things that happen. But I'd always come back just knowing, I was like, I have to finish this so that I can keep doing this, because if I always told myself, if I don't do it now, I'm probably never gonna do it. Because as like the older I get and the more work I do, like life's only gonna get busier from here on out. So I gotta, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna make it work, it has to be now, while it's ready, essentially ready to go, while it's still in my mind. So there would be times I came back, and sometimes it'd be so long. I would have 300 pages in a Google Doc, and it'd be so long that when I came back, I'd have to read from the beginning and essentially read everything over again and get all the way down to where I had left off, so that I could keep going. So I have told my friends this too, and people I've sold it to. I've read the book so many times that I'm excited to never read it again in my life. As
Yeah.
happy as I am with it, though.
It's a real thing though. I mean, I do that all the time. I like get sick of it. Like
Right.
I mean, I still love it. I dedicated, however long in my life to it, but you do get to especially if you publish it, you get to the point where like you're going through proofs, you're going through, whatever, you're just looking at it again and again. Or if you've been off it for a while and coming back to it, like you say,
Yeah.
you just have to remember what the hell is it on.
Yeah.
I'll talk to people. I did a book in 2010. I published a book in 2010 called Clockfire. That people that is one of my most popular books, and people will often but it has like these 77 little plays that are impossible to produce, and so it kind of reads like these little flash fictions. And people who read that book will sometimes come up to me and start talking to me about their favorite play, and I will have like no clue what they're talking about because like I don't remember that was in there at all, and I'll be like, oh, that's a cool idea, you know and I got to that point where it's like once it came out in 2010, I was like done.
Right. Yeah.
Like my joke about it is like by the time they're published, I won't read them again unless you pay me. You literally have to pay me to
Yeah.
read from the book. Otherwise I won't do it. But I mean, I love those books and everything. I'm proud of them, but it's like you got other things to do. And
Right.
that's the other thing that kind of like that long view of it that you're talking about, where I think that's also a hard thing that people have And something that stops a lot of people is having the long view, because what they'll often do is they'll, either they won't, but let's say they do finish a major project, like a book of some sort. What people often do then is invest so heavily in that thing. Either they'll invest their money or their time or their, but which is fine. But like their psychic energy is the thing that they'll often invest, and they'll get very and I think it's normal to do it, but they'll get very invested in like how it does, like whether anyone's buying it or whether people like it or whatever.
Right.
And like that's, I mean, it makes sense that one person would be invested in that, but what people will often forget is like, um, the most important thing isn't really so much how this thing is doing, but like that you're doing another thing and another thing and another thing. And often writers will get disappointed, like for example, like how a book is selling. Like I had but they won't realize that like the best thing they could do potentially is, I mean, yes, you got to, be beyond that book and promoting it, which is hard to do because you're often sick of it by that point, but the other side of it is like one of the best things you can do to sell an old book is write a new book.
Right.
There's a saying in publishing that nothing sells a new book like an old book, or an old book like a new book. And I remember I was talking to somebody a little while ago. One of my friends was saying, they're talking about a book of theirs, and they're saying, "Oh well, blah blah blah. That book didn't, sell super well." And I said to them, like, "You don't know that. Um, you know, Dan Brown didn't sell any books until later. And all of a sudden, when his Da Vinci Code hit, now Deception Point is a bestseller, which it never was."
Right.
You don't really know, like as long as they're in print, their lifespan is still going. Like I just woke up this morning and my phone told me I'd sold a book off my site. And if somebody's buying that book off the site, and that's an older book, and if somebody's buying it direct from me off the site, that means someone's buying it on Amazon and I don't know about it yet, kind of thing, like,
Right.
and I'm not promoting that book. So like there's like whatever's happening is happening, and you don't necessarily know. But the
Yeah.
reason I'm selling books right now, like old books, is because I'm doing a Kickstarter for this new project. So it's literally a project that's not done and not out is selling like an old project that is done. And
Okay.
until you
Gotcha.
have a body of work, that kind of stuff can't happen.
Right.
But a lot of people will stop before they get that body of work because they get so invested in one thing.
Hmm.
I was talking to my daughter about this once, and she when we were driving the car when she was like a teenager, and she was kind of getting more seriously into writing poetry, and she was saying something like, she was talking about like how do you get over if people don't like your poetry or something, because I think I'd gotten a bad review of a book or something, and she had like seen that I got this bad review, and I was saying like, yeah, she's like saying, oh, ask me like if it bothered me or something. I was like, you know what? It doesn't really bother me. I go, because you got to understand that like that person doesn't like this one poem or whatever.
Right.
I go, but I've written thousands of poems. I go, but if you've only written 10 poems, it makes sense that you'd have like a real investment in like how that people, what they think of that poem. I go, but for me, it's like, if nobody likes this poem, I got, 10,000 more.
Hmm.
And like, I think you get to a certain point with books and things too. Like if you've only got one, it's really, hard to divorce yourself from how it's doing or how it's people feel about it. Um, and whereas once you start to kind of build a body of work, it's like, it's more easy to kind of separate yourself, and you can kind of pay attention to things that, make you happy, and you can kind of let the other things slide in a way. Like
Right.
you get a healthier, like you start to see the long view a little bit. But it's very hard to see that long view, especially when people are starting out. So I find it interesting that you like how did you manage to internalize that idea that like, oh, if I don't do this, then I won't be able to do this other thing later, like this is like maybe not the only thing I have to do, but this is like a stepping stone to having like a career, say. Like because a lot of people have a hard time getting that idea, but what I do notice is that people who tend to actually do well over the long term, they have some ability, maybe some days they can't do it, but for the most part, they have an ability to connect to the idea that this is a part of a longer plan. Like
Right.
maybe I don't know all the parts of the plan, but it's I know at least like I can't do anything unless like I can't do X until I've done what Y
Yeah.
here or whatever,
Um, yeah, I knew like when I wrote Mended, and I knew I wanted to publish that, and I knew, like you said, I knew, like that it had to be done if I wanted to keep going. And as soon as I sent that off for editing, and I was told um, the book will be back to you in 2 to 4 weeks. And that was kind of when I was like, all right, that's 2 to 4 weeks to start doing something else now. So it's essentially as soon as I had parted ways with that book or with Mended for editing, I went back into my Google Drive and started going through old things that I had stopped working on when I started dedicating a lot of the time to Mended, and I started refurbishing some stuff, and then some of the mental lines got drawn where it's like, okay, some of this is coming back to me with I remember what I wanted to do with this. And so I pulled a few projects to the front, and I was like, hey, I got a few weeks to really do this now. Um, so I started those ones, and that was basically 2 weeks of essentially forgetting Mended was even a book at all. Where I was like, I don't even care. Like it's out of sight, out of mind type of thing. It's I don't have it right
Mhm.
now, so it's not my problem right now. So I started writing these other stories, one of which I'm hoping to have finished the first draft in the next month or two. And so yeah, it was kind of just as soon as Mended was gone, it was a go 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 type of mindset where, and of course not to rush any of this because I know I think I was a little, or I am a little nervous still of all the time of I know I need to keep writing so that I can keep on writing, but I want to be careful that everything that I'm writing, I'm still taking enough time. There's enough of me in this that it's not a rushed piece for the sake of writing a piece, that it all has to actually be something real and something that has a little bit of heart in it that was actually worth the time instead of just churning out story for the sake of churning out stories. So that's all, that thought's always in the back of my mind, that so I'm always a little conscious of those decisions when I'm writing. And so yeah, now that Mended's out and I'm promoting that, and then now in my spare time writing the second project that is nearing initial completion, I'm just being very mindful that that is as fine-tuned as an idea that Mended ended up being. I want it to be on the same level where both of these ideas are one's Mended's not on a higher pedestal than this next project. So that
Did
that
Adam
thought scares me a little bit, but it's a balancing act kind of.
did Adam Fuchs copyright this? I think he did,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And he
he did.
blurbed it well. So
Yeah.
me and Adam would often like you would joke that like Adam would is the kind of guy who it's like he'll message me and he'll be like, well, he goes, I just finished a book, or I'll message him and I'll be like, yeah, I just finished my manuscript, finally. And he'll be like, well, time to start another one.
Yeah.
Like just
Yeah,
kind of keep, you got to keep it going. Like he's the kind of guy who
exactly.
will literally like he'll finish a book, he'll set it to publishing, and then the next day he'll be like working on the next book kind of thing. Like I
Right.
don't know if he's as hectic as he used to be now that he's got kids and everything, but he had I remember like for many years that was like his thing. He'd write like so many words a day, and then as soon as he was done the book, he would be starting a new book because he had
Mhm.
and then sometimes he was doing a series that way. Other times he would just be doing like the next thing entirely.
Yeah,
But he had, he always had that work ethic of like, um, you gotta on one hand kind of enjoy yourself and remember that it's special, but at the same time like treat it like you're digging ditches or something,
exactly. Yeah.
and not get so wrapped up in the idea that it's special. It's kind of a bit of a paradox I find where it's like and then you mentioned something earlier too, which is I think also a thing that comes into play, which is the idea that sometimes it's easy to forget that like even though this is kind of work and a job in a manner of speaking, um, and you kind of have to approach it in a workman-like manner or craftsman like manner. There is still a level at which like it is a break from other things,
Right.
and it can kind of stabilize your psychic space in a manner of speaking. Like what I'll find often is people. I think I still. I don't know when if I'm not. I don't remember when I started teaching this idea, but like, so I don't know if I did it in that class or not. But I would often teach people this idea of like a hell week schedule. Like you make a schedule, and then like when you're going to write in a week, but then like throw that schedule away and remember like what's going to happen really is everything's going to go to hell.
Hmm.
And at some point when everything goes to hell, like you need to have like in that week, like when might you be able to write? Because one, you want to keep momentum through even these tough times so that you don't just stop cold. But two, when things are going to hell, you need a break.
Right.
And you need to like, you know, at least there's like this thing you can control and you're good at, and you've got like, and is something you enjoy that you can take some space for in your horrible week. And in the sense like prioritizing it, but having like that balance with other things in your life, it is a tricky thing. As is, when you move from this one to the next one,
Right.
because on one hand you gotta, to be fair to the book in a manner of speaking, you got to keep promoting it and stuff. But I know like if it people like I know myself at least like by the time the thing's out, I'm doing something else, especially in traditional publishing. Self-publishing it doesn't have as long a window, but in traditional publishing, it's like by the time the book comes out, like you've been doing something else for like 2 years maybe.
Right.
So it's hard to kind of get back in the headspace of like I'll find myself like I'm trying to promote this book. I don't remember what's in it, you know,
Yeah,
and I'm afraid to read it in case there's full of mistakes.
exactly.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
at that point, again, I don't want to read it anymore. But
Right.
I mean, I can usually connect to the idea still and everything. Like I did spend serious time, and I can remember it if I really try. But like at the same time, it's like there's that balance of like moving forward versus kind of running over the same ground of actually
Right.
promoting this thing and trying to remember that people don't necessarily know anything about it. People still like, I'll find myself surprised that like I was just at the Winnipeg Comic Con recently, and I had old books on the table or whatever, and I'm really pushing like this comic I've been doing called The Eye Collector, but people are coming by and picking up like it's a book from 2009, like, oh, what's this about? Like my first book, and
Yeah.
it's like, what is that book about? Like I do remember it, but at the same time, it's like the idea that it would be new to somebody is kind of, it's easy to forget that it's like new to somebody
Right.
because, it's like a new to you, sort of in a sense.
Yeah, and I remember in one of the when I through the whole writing process, emailing you occasionally back and forth, asking
Hmm.
questions, mechanically just how some of these things, how these some of these concepts work if I want to translate it into paper. And I remember there was one email you sent to me. It's probably one of the last ones before I published, where you said if the not these exact words, but essentially how I interpreted it was if there's mistakes, if the book sucks, if people hate it, it doesn't really matter because you can just write another one. Like there's no you can do it, and I found solace in that because I can do it. You can keep doing it forever. You can keep trying. You don't have three tries and you're out. So I really liked that too, and I think that's taken a lot of stress out of my mind because I'm sure there is stuff in that book that I if I read it again, like you just said, I probably would want to change or that I don't like anymore or that I could have done better now. And but now you kind of just shrug your shoulders. It's like, well, it's all building blocks to help the next project and the one after that, and so on and so forth. So that I think is probably one of the biggest draws to writing and trying to pursue that as a career too. Just it's something even if you suck at it, you're not going to get fired. You can just keep doing it forever if you want.
Yeah, that maybe becomes its own like private hell, but there's a way in which it is kind of freeing, I think. I'm very perfectionist in my tendencies, and what I had to learn was um, if I want to have any sort of career, I need to put limits on that. So like my limit is um, when the book is accepted and ready for public and getting prepared for publication, there's like a few there's like a process of going through the proofs, like where I'm checking proofs, and like I'll set a kind of time limit on that. Like I give myself like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or whatever it is that I have. Um, and that'll be my time when I'm a perfectionist, and I'll be like, obsessing about like every comma and I'll read it backwards, I got just to make sure the words are spelled right. Like I'll do everything I can think to do, and I'll like drive everyone insane because I'm being such a perfectionist and so
Yeah.
persnickety about like I'll like message like the designer and be like, is there an extra space before the word is? Are there two spaces or one? Like um but then once that like time limit is done and like my deadline has passed, at that point it's like, well, if there's a mistake in it, it's just too bad. Like
Right.
it doesn't bother me anymore. I'm fine. I won't worry about it anymore. Like I had my little time to be a perfectionist and get it all out. Because it's not that you shouldn't care about the quality or whatever, but there is like I again, like I'm very, obsessive about quality, and perfectionism is my thing in many ways. But like it just won't serve you at a certain point. You'll just be paralyzed and you'll never do anything else, or you'll just be feel bad about a mistake you made or whatever, right? Like there's a certain point at which it's like you have to like let it go and do something else, and keep in mind that the no one single thing is going to make or break you. Like I'll even find myself every once in a while, like I'll be working on a project and I'll be kind of thinking ahead of like, okay, when this is done, maybe I'll send it here, maybe I'll send it there, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. Should I self-publish this or not publish it? And every once in a while, I'll catch myself doing that kind of thing, and I'll have to stop and I'll say to myself, you know what? If I pick the wrong publisher, I'll just write another book.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
that was really big for me to be able to say I can write another one, and especially with Mended, because I think part of me well, I think a part of a lot of people when writing something like that, especially in today's climate with Hollywood and the way movies are, we're almost hardwired to consume it as fast as you can and then not even digest it and go, all right, I gotta write a sequel now. Like that now the second one has to come out and the first one becomes entirely irrelevant. So a few people have asked me, am I gonna write a second one? Are you gonna do more? And I think part of me wants to, probably partly just because of how ingrained that is in my head now with trends. And then on top of that, having this be my first published work, that like a lot of those characters are you hold near and dear to yourself, having worked on that for so long. So part of me wants to go back and revisit this, but I keep telling people I don't think it's definitely not going to be a Hollywood sequel coming out in the next year or two. Like that is way down the line, if ever.
yeah,
Just
chasing trends is a dangerous thing.
exactly right.
And
So
you're right to point out sometimes the trend isn't obvious. It's not necessarily like you'll have obvious trends like, oh, vampires are hot right now, right?
right.
But then you have non-obvious trends like people are doing series, people are doing sequels,
Mhm.
uh, you know, movies are buying books for television.
Yeah.
These are non-obvious trends, and but they are trends and they shift. Like right now, it's very hard to sell a series to a publisher, even though it seems like there's a lot of series coming out. In the 90s, it was almost impossible to sell a horror novel. But that trend shifted, and now we've got a real boom in horror.
Yeah.
What I like to say around often is like, if you see a bandwagon going past your house, it's too late to jump on the bandwagon. And people don't realize like it often, because just how trends work. By the time you notice the trend, it's typically too late to be part of that trend.
Right.
Now you have an opportunity with instant publishing and social media and stuff to do that. Like I remember when Trump was president, someone rushed out a biography of Trump. Like you can do stuff like that,
Exactly. Yeah.
but it's hard to do, and it's not necessarily. There's a real time limit, and you don't know what the time limit is, unfortunately. Like if your vampires are hot right now, you don't know. Does that mean they're going to be hot for 10 years? Or does that mean like they're already dead and they're just
Right.
republishing old vampire books and not actually buying new ones?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was like I said before, writing this when I was in the middle of writing when Endgame came out, and I was like, man, this is gonna be annoying. Like, even though I published it and now it's published, the movie came out 2, 3 years ago already. But writing it at the time when that came out, I was like, if I was publishing right now, I can just imagine all the social media comments and people saying, oh, it's riding the coattails of Endgame. It's just another time travel story. So like it loses it already. I felt like it already would have lost that novelty because people would have said, "Oh, we just watched Endgame. We got our time travel fix. Like we don't need this anymore. This is just riding the hype of something else that already perfected it, if you want to say." So that was always in the back of my mind when the movie came out anyway, and now it's been a little bit. But to have the book not like time travel was not the entire crux of the book as much as the characters and self-motivation was for them. But that was definitely in the back of my mind thinking of that, where I was like, especially when you have a trend that is that popular, right? Because Endgame was the golden boy of all movies at that time anyway, and that was people were excited for that for so long. So it's almost like you said, trying to figure out how long a trend might last, and then even committing to a trend like that is scary because there's a lot of people who kind of just roll their eyes and say if it's not the best of the best in that trend, it's not worth it at all.
And when the trend's on, there's a lot more competition. Like one of the
Yeah,
reasons Harry Potter blew up, people don't realize that one of the big reasons that Harry Potter did well and blew up and became a massive success is because nobody was publishing fiction, YA fantasy, and nobody was publishing about wizards. In fact,
yeah,
she was turned down for that reason. There was no market. There was considered to be no market for that kind of book.
yeah.
Now they were wrong. There was an underserved market,
Hmm.
but the fact is, like um, at the time she published the book, there was no competition.
Yeah,
And that's sort of why the book blew up in many respects. People wanted books about wizards, but nobody was publishing them because everyone thought, nobody wants books about wizards, kind of
yeah,
thing. That's not exactly it. That's an oversimplification, but that's very much like the thing that can happen. Whereas now that everyone's publishing wizards and Harry Potter clones are all over the place, or
right,
whatever, it's just very hard to be noticed. It's always hard to get noticed, but like that competition doesn't help in that way. But like you also have just weird things, right? Like I have a friend who in 2018, 2019, she sold a novel and it was slated to major publisher and it was slated for publication in 2020. And the novel was about, as a science fiction novel, about a coronavirus pandemic.
oh,
And of course, by the time 2020, summer 2020 rolls around, now everyone's in a coronavirus pandemic.
yeah,
And now the publisher is like, well, we don't even know if we should publish this novel, kind of thing.
yeah,
Now they eventually did publish it. They did kind of stick to their plan, and it did well. It's a great book and everything. But like, who I mean, on one hand, who would have predicted that? On the other hand, she's literally predicting it in the book.
right,
you know, like, so one of the things that was freaking her out actually, as she was, like doing her edit, she's like, I think I'm right, and the science here makes sense. It's like inevitably going to be a coronavirus pandemic soon.
yeah,
And she's just freaking out about it a little personally. And then she starts to, she's doing all this research about it. And so before other people, she's like getting the news and all this stuff. But like now all of a sudden, like that is like in the way of your book coming out in a certain
right,
sense. And like there's a level of notoriety now your book is kind of gathering, which it could help it, it could hurt it, hard to say.
exactly,
So ultimately, like, because she's an excellent writer and wrote an excellent book, like that will have some staying power when all these other kind of flash in the pan things have gone.
right,
But that's really the thing you have to kind of almost keep in mind is like the time. It's almost like Warren Buffett's investing strategy. It's like not no, let's not pay attention to what's hot right this second or what might be hot tomorrow. But like, okay, people will always want to drink Coca-Cola. like,
Right. Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, people need shoes, like that's sort of like, um, you have to kind of be thinking in that longer horizon, which is frankly hard to do because humans just biologically and psychologically aren't wired for it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so figuring all that out was definitely interesting for sure. And then one thing I struggled with writing for sure, and that I think I emailed you about. I emailed the editor as well, and about detail, because I know, and I think that was huge even in university too. Writing projects creatively, and I think so many people, I would imagine so many people get hung up on the detail because everyone wants to be the Stephen King of detail, right? You want to, in your mind, you think if you want to like crank out 2 pages describing the most random things just because it looks good, right? So I got really hung up on that at the beginning anyway. And then during the times I wasn't writing, I got really, really into reading Michael Crichton. I bought a, a ton of his library of books, from his original Jurassic Park books to some of the ones that have come out since he passed that have been finished for him. But I admire everything about his writing, from the ideas to the way he writes, because it was so, on almost all his books, not really Jurassic Park is probably the worst example of this, but some of his newer ones that have been finished anyway, they're written and described so plainly and in very short, blunt sentences, and but it works so. It's such a weird skill because I feel like I can't do it. I feel like I write 2 sentences to describe a couch, and it's like, this does not sound like a couch in my head, but he writes 2 sentences describing an apartment building, and you have this full image in your head based off these 2 sentences. So when I started writing and I was reading his books, and now especially writing a new project now, it's something I keep in mind, that, and I think you have probably said it before, I might be wrong, that less is more almost when you're writing. It's so important for so many things to not flood the page with words because you want that page count to be higher or something like that. So that was really big for me, and a big inspiration in some of the stuff I'm writing now, and a little bit in Mended. It wasn't so much in Mended, but Michael Crichton's work, and a lot of it posthumously, unfortunately, is some of his best novels. They were fantastic, and it was great, that a perfect example of less is more in my mind.
What I often will give people as an exercise is, imagine you had to pay the reader $1 for every word they read. And how do you get, if you've got a poem that's 15 words, how do you get it down to $10, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, how do you
Yeah.
just keep slashing it and slashing it? And like, that more luxurious style can work for people. But it just becomes difficult in a lot of ways. Readers just don't tend to have patience for it unless it's perfectly executed.
Right.
But also, it's just, the more words you have, the more problems you have, in a manner of speaking. Even just
Exactly.
simply on a grammatical level, it becomes grammatically complicated
Yeah.
for anyone to understand what's being said or what the point of the sentence is, or whatever. Um, Crichton also, as you say, had a good talent. Like, of course, Crichton did a famous time travel book called Timeline, which I actually mentioned in one of my books. In my book, The Lightning of Possible Storms, is a story called Judith, where this character has left her copy of Michael Crichton's Timeline on the bed, and this other character is returning it to her, kind of thing, at one point. And so, but like, Crichton was a really powerful writer at taking that. Like, he would have like a hard science concept,
Yeah.
and he would explain it very simply and bluntly and quickly.
Yeah.
It's like boom, boom, boom. This is how time travel works. Got to go.
Yeah.
And now there's arrows flying. Right. Like it's very quickly, and it did make sense if you looked at it. You could argue how much sense it made, like any science fiction thing, but he did have a real clear set of ideas that he would get across really quickly, and then he would return to like the action of the scene or what
Right.
have you. As opposed to as I say, the tendency for a lot of writers is one to give too much information and too fast, and then that'll also bleed into like details and descriptions.
Hmm.
Um, Let me ask you as a final question, just sort of why this book kind of and this story mattered to you, outside of you know seeing it as like a thing you needed to accomplish to move forward in your kind of life and career. Like, what's like about the story sort of itself made you uh, keep returning to it, and made it a story you really wanted to tell?
Yeah. I think it was this I guess the underlying message, if you want to call it, that is buried beneath all of the science fiction nonsense and the pirates and time travel and everything was this want to tell a story about how everyone anywhere is part of in real life is part of everyone else's story. Like I play a character, for lack of a better word, in the lives of my siblings and my parents and my friends, coworkers, boss, so on and so forth. You kind of have these roles everywhere that you're not really aware of. And I think it was kind of a cool message to say, to be like, you don't really know the scope of what you're involved in at all at any given time, but you are a gear in someone else's story that's moving along, and all these pieces are moving along in ways you don't know and that you don't understand or that you're not even aware of. So I thought that was a really important thing to say. Like everyone's kind of important. You can say that's, it kind of sounds cheesy to say it out loud in that way, but and in such a crazy busy moving world with or 8 billion people now, I guess, that it's very easy to kind of lose yourself in like a 8 to 5 job, um rinse and repeat, do it all over again, and kind of your life is static. So to write this story and be like, yeah, you have all these characters, some these pirates, and then some people in the present time who are living these average boring lives, and then you individually they all look kind of lame, nothing's really exciting even for the pirates, because they don't know any better, so their lives are mundane to them probably. But then when you mash these all together and you have all these moving parts, suddenly it becomes this huge web of all these different motives and needs and wants, kind of pushing everyone into their own little space. So that was kind of the underlying idea that I wanted, that there's all these stories and it's kind of about these characters finding their own role in someone else's story, which I thought was pretty cool. And of course, as cheesy as it sounds, it becomes less cheesy when you bury it under the mounds of science fiction and all the nonsense that comes along with that.
Well, thanks very much for talking to me, and congratulations again on the book. Again, it's Brady Tiel. Mended is the book. The best place to find it right now is on Amazon. So thanks for talking to me, Brady, and
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
keep writing the wrong way.